Salam and a good day to our chairman of the session and my fellow presenters. Today I'm going to present my study titled An Empirical Panel Data Analysis on Technology Adoption and Economic Growth in 12 Selected Asian Countries. In economics, there are 4 key factors of adoption, termed as land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Capital is seen as essential since it's the man-made resources which are used to aid production to be more efficient, such as machinery, factory, as well as transportation. However, there are 2 key sources that utilize these factors. They are technology and the effort of entrepreneur. Entrepreneur will introduce new technologies that not only able to increase production of goods and services, but at a faster rate too. New technologies such as ICTs are vastly accepted and perceived as a catalyst to a nation's economic growth. These technologies are the key player for developing countries to adopt because of their speed, inexpensive, and convenient. Hall and Kahn stated that it is diffusion rather than invention of technology which affects the rate of economic growth of a nation. When users are able to adopt the new technology, then it could contribute to improve the well-being of society. This study focuses on 4 sources of technology adoption based on Ritchie and Rosa categories, that is mobile cellular subscriptions, passengers car vehicles, secure of internet server, and fixed telephone line. Since 1983, the users of mobile phones have increased exponentially. As stated by Kafella, developing countries use these mobile phones for searching information that enable small business owners to promote their products and communicate with their customers effectively. On one part, the passenger cars vehicles in use are measured by the demand of motor vehicle. It's stated that the higher the demand, the higher the GDP development of a nation. So the increase in demand for cars has led to the growth of automobile industry in developing countries that able to cater for those low and middle income groups. The diffusion of broadband, defined as the technology that enables high-speed transfer of data, is linked to the emergence of the internet. In some developing countries, the private sector has provided internet access at a very minimal cost, which create important implications to business development. On the impact of fixed telephone lines, it is used to be identified as an essential telecommunication for fostering productivity and economic growth. However, the introduction of wireless telecommunication has replaced the wired ones, and now they are the leading telecommunications market. Not all these innovative applications or technologies could be easily adopted if the government in developing countries are unable to provide the physical infrastructure. The need to allow competitive environment can help to cut the high cost communications, in particular for small enterprises operations. Another issue of lack of security and legal framework of e-commerce could create a barrier to its growth. Therefore, it is crucial to understand the sources of technology adoption that could directly have effect on this nation's economic growth. Therefore, the objectives of this paper are, number 1, to determine empirically the sources of technology adoption that contribute to the economic growth. 2, to identify the suitable econometric models to describe data of these nations. And 3, to investigate the relationship between the 4 sources of technology adoption and the economic growth of these nations. Alright, this study will utilize a balanced data, alright, based on the 12 selected Asian countries, with a limited 5-year period from 2011 to 2015. The selection of these countries are based on the availability of the relevant data. Because it is a balanced data, it means that any data that is not available, that particular country will need to be dropped out from this study. Right? 2, they are categorized as developing countries by the World Bank, and these nations are located in the East and South Asia. I will use 3 methods of panel data estimations: the pool ordinary least square, the random effects model, and the fixed effects model. The static panel data notations is shown as equation 1, where the IT here is very important because that shows the panel data, where I is the individual economic units and T is the time period. So in this case, the individual economic units is referring to the countries, right? The 12 Asian countries. The empirical model is shown by the equation 2. You can see the GDP is the dependent variable, whereas the 4 sources of technology adoption is the independent variable, or the explanatory variables, and we have also epsilon IT to denote the error term, and alpha is the constant here. Right, the pool OLS model shown in equation 2 treats the error term to be identical and independently distributed disturbances that are not correlated with X, the explanatory variables. So both the intercept and the slope are assumed to be equal across units and time. However, the results from equation 2 are heterogeneity bias, since the intercept may vary across units and time because of X and Y. The reason is, in panel analysis, there are 2 types of variations. 1 is cross-section units, and 2 within time series units. Between cross-section refers to the variability across the units of observation. For instance, we say country could differ in terms of human capital or factor endowment, or even quality of their institutions, while within various captures the overall variance due to the variability within economic units. So to accommodate for such heterogeneity, the error term is decomposed into 2 components, that is lambda I, shown by this equation here, and mu IT. Lambda I refers to the specific individual effect, which is assumed to be constant across individuals, and mu IT represents the normal error term. The random effect models assume lambda I to be a random variable with mean 0 and is uncorrelated with the regressor. So that's why you see the covariance lambda I xit is equals to 0. And from this equation, you can see that the error term now becomes lambda I plus mu IT. In the fixed effects model, on the other hand, its individual specific effects are assumed to have intercept that may vary across units. So now we can see the covariance is no more equals to 0. And this lambda I is correlated with xit, meaning relies on the time series variations. So the model, you can see here shown that the lambda I becomes part of the constant here, and we have the mu IT at the end of the equation here. An appropriate test is conducted to discriminate among the models to decide the suitable estimator for the model. Alright, so the thing is that if you want to choose between pool model and the random effects model, we have to run Bruch-Pagan-Lagrangian multiplier test. The hypothesis is shown as below here. Alright, if we reject the null hypothesis, it means that the random effect model is the appropriate one. On another hand, to choose whether the random or fixed effect models provide better analysis, we use the Hausman test based on this hypothesis shown here. Again, if we reject the null hypothesis, it means that the fixed effect model is the appropriate method. And if this is so, we have to run or conduct the diagnostic checks to ensure that the result is free from multicollinearity, heterogeneity, and serial correlation problems. To begin my discussion of findings, I run a preliminary analysis for all the data. That is the descriptive and correlation for each variable shown by table 1 and table 2. So we can see that in table 1, in summary, the highest score is PCV while the lowest is FTL, whereas the standard deviation, the smallest value is MCS and the largest value is SIS here. So it means here that MCS varies less compared to SIS. In table 2, we just look at the correlation, the highest correlation is between GDP and SIS. Score is 0.86, and it shows a strong positive correlation, meaning these two variables are highly associated. All right, in terms of the discussion of the results of the three models, all right, we can see that pool OLS shows there are three variables, that is MCS, SIS, and FTL, have a significant effect on GDP, whereas if we look at the REM, random and fixed effect, they reveal two similar explanatory variables, that is MCS and SIS, significant at 1% level of significance, that have effect on GDP. In table 4, to choose the appropriate model among the three, we can see that when we test Bruce-Pagan LM test, the result shows that we, as mentioned earlier, we reject the H0, we choose the random effect, and for the random versus fixed effect, we test using Hausman. Again, we reject H0, and it seems that we have to choose fixed effect as the appropriate model. So the diagnostic checks, because fixed effect is the appropriate model, we have to run perform the three diagnostic checks, and definitely we can see there is heteroscedasticity and autocorrelation problems. All right, but there is no multicollinearity problem here. So due to this, we have to run to rectify the problems. We regress again with heteroscedasticity and autocorrelation cluster, right, to rectify the problems of FEM. And definitely based on table 6, we can see that only SIS is the source of technology adoption, which has a positive significant effect on GDP. So it means that the better the secure of internet server, the more it will promote the GDP of these nations. So to conclude my study, right, we can say that the outcome of the findings reported a statistically positive significant effects of SIS on GDP of these nations. So out of the 4 variables or sources of technology adoption, SIS have the significant positive significant impact on GDP. Right, so we can claim that there is a strong link between technology adoption and economic growth, specifically regarding the security of internet server. So due to this, right, despite being the critical factor of technology adoption that would promote growth through e-commerce activities, countries are worried about the rapid increase of cybercrime threats. So cyber attacks on civilian infrastructure and massive privacy violations by companies and government have called for the need of greater control by international treaties. So that's why we see that country like China, whom has the largest number of internet users, has initiated the movement toward sovereign control and even censor services which could threaten their political control. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you.